All right, now here this week to talk about the experience of covering the Bernie Sanders rally is freelance photographer Renee Rosensteel and City Paper multimedia editor Ashley Murray. Also here to talk about a big change we experienced here at City Paper last week is our editor Charlie Deitch. Hey everybody.
Hey Alex.
All right, Charlie, let's start with you, because many people saw the news last week that City Paper was purchased by Eagle Publishing. Who is Eagle Publishing, and what does this mean for our beloved Alt Weekly?
Eagle Publishing is a family-owned publishing company from Butler County. They publish the Butler Eagle and the Cranberry Eagle. They've long had an association with City Paper, and we've always had our paper printed there. So they've seen our work for many years, and apparently they like what they've seen to the point that they decided to put in a bid and purchase the paper. So this is all happening very quick. I mean, I don't have a ton of information right now, I guess, but I've met with the owners and the new publisher, Van Smith. They all seem they like what we do. They want us to continue to do what we do, and so to the public at large, they shouldn't notice any change at all.
Okay. So the Butler Eagle, they operate in a county that's a little bit more conservative than ours.
You could say that.
Yeah. Could you talk about how that might affect what we do moving forward?
So I talked about this with the new owners, and I think people will notice if they read their editorial pages that they probably even come from a bit of a more conservative standpoint. But I've been assured, I mean, you don't buy something unless you know what you're buying. So they've clearly, as they've told me, they've read our paper, they really like what we do, and they want us to continue doing what we're doing. So yeah, right now, I mean, as far as I know, as far as I've been told, it's not going to have any effect at all. And I believe it. I mean, they seem genuine in how much they like what we do here, both in the paper and online at www.pghcitypaper.com.
They also operate with a paywall. Is that something that might happen here at Pittsburgh City Paper?
No, I've been assured. I mean, for us who, it seemed like why would you have a paywall for something that you can get free on the streets? And they agree with the same thing. They've guaranteed that it doesn't make sense for this business model to have a paywall. So yeah, there'll be no paywall whatsoever. All the content will be will continue for free. You can get it for free online. And we're hoping that this move will allow us to really upgrade the products in some ways and offer more online offerings as well as potentially other print offerings and so forth. So I will say this, I think that the paper you're going to see the paper be able to grow under this new ownership. I'm looking forward to that. I really am.
All right, a lot to look forward to. All right, another thing I wanted to talk to you about is your column this week. You wrote about whether or not the supporters that came out to see Bernie Sanders last week in Pittsburgh will actually translate to votes in the primary later this month. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed by the crowds that came out to see Bernie Sanders last week, and I'm also impressed by the fact that when he got in this race, everyone was thinking, oh, this is he's nothing more than a distraction, I guess, on Hillary's way to getting the nomination. And I like the fact that he's been able to turn this into a more spirited campaign. He's been able to force Hillary Clinton to talk about issues that maybe she wouldn't ordinarily talk about. Take stances on things like Keystone Pipeline and things like that she wouldn't ordinarily have to take a stand on. And so she could play to her more conservative supporters as well. So from that standpoint, I like the fact that Bernie's in the race. What I'm wondering, though, is will this actually transform into boats? It may transform into boats, but what I'm really concerned about, Alex, is will it transform into votes on Election Day? And it could. I mean, certainly we saw that from the grassroots support that Obama had. And Hillary Clinton won this county, and she does very well in Pennsylvania. But I was impressed with the number of people that came out to see Bernie. I was at a few. I'll say this: I was at a few Obama campaign events before he was elected in 2008, and he never had one at the convention center. I mean, I think that was kind of a ballsy move, because he could show up and there could be a few hundred people in there, and it's going to look like a real small, it's going to look like a big room at that point. So he was able to get a number of people in there, and I think it was good. And So we're gonna look at that, and then we also have our election issue coming up next week, where we're gonna look at the presidential election in a little more detail. But really, the people I think that we should ask about the rally are Renee and Ashley, because they were actually there on the floor and probably have some good perspective on what the crowd was like.
Yeah, Renee, I wanted to ask you about your pictures from the rally. People got really creative with their signs. There was a Bernie Sanders as Christopher Lloyd's Back to the Future character, saying that we need Bernie to take us back to the future or to the future. Others did a sort of Bernie meets Andy Warhol pop art signs, and one woman even wore a wig with a bird's nest on it, which is a reference to the bird incident in Portland. So can you tell me a little bit about what you were looking for and what you saw at that rally when you were taking pictures?
I was looking for people who are really having fun with the whole, extravaganza of politics. And I think that the thing that I've noticed in Bernie supporters is, first off, they're kind. They're the sweetest people. But the second thing I've noticed is that they're really having fun with him as a brand. Like, beyond what he's saying, in terms of policy, they're just enjoying, doing their own take on who they think he is. And that was one of the things I'd hoped to come out.
What was one of the most memorable things you saw that day?
I really, well, there were two things that I really liked. One was the woman who had painted her tights with sort of the Bernie hair going all over the place, and his glasses, and she had them all up and down her tights, and I said, wait, I have to take this picture. And then there was another guy who was further away, and I couldn't get out of the corral that they have us media people in, but he had on a little Pabst Blue Ribbon beer button that said Bernie fucking Sanders, and I thought that was just hilarious.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's wrong, but it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really big. The Bernie fucking Sanders Pabst Blue Ribbon logo. I saw a lot of people.
There was even a sign that it was a PBR box that somebody had ripped apart and done a Bernie Sanders sign on the other side. So there was some PBR being
Big
noted there.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, from your end, what was it like being a member of the press or the media covering an event like this?
So I quickly learned that you don't bring coffee to these things, and I needed coffee because we had to be there at 7:30 a.m. So I bought a cup along the way, and then I bypassed the long line and I go to the media check-in, and then they sort of Renee also experienced this. They pass you from volunteer to volunteer. So like one volunteer walks you like 30 to 60 feet, and then they pass you on to the next volunteer who walks you 90 feet, and so when I get to the volunteer who walks me past the restrooms portion, he says, well, if you think you're going to have to go to the restroom at all this morning, this is your last chance. And I was like, well. And Charlie sits beside me at work, and he knows that I get up from my desk at least once an hour.
I don't know what she's doing, but she does get up.
At most 5 times an hour. So I went in and I dumped my coffee down the drain and, my pee and everything. So then I get in the line to check in, and we're getting searched, and the Secret Service tells you put your gear down, put all your bags down. And so at this point I had a camera bag and a tripod bag, and so I put them down, and then I see the bomb sniffing dog on standby. And so I remember I have an egg and cheese sandwich in my camera bag. So I run out of line and I get the egg and cheese sandwich, because my first thought is, I do not want this dog to eat my egg and cheese sandwich, because while I pee once an hour, that's about my eating schedule. So I get my egg and cheese sandwich, and the dog sniffs the bags, and they're searching them, and I start eating in line. I'm not really paying attention, and so when they're done, I just kind of pop that last bite in my mouth, and so that I could use both hands to get my bags. So I get out of line, and I pick up my bags, and I have this bite of sandwich in my mouth, and then I hear, "Did I tell you to check your bags?" And I was like, "Oh my god!" It was the Secret Service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And and I'm young, and all my peers are around me, and I'm thinking I don't want to be known as the journalist in Pittsburgh who like screws up in front of the Secret Service.
Yeah, the
But-
egg sandwich lady.
The example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See.
But after that, all's well that ends well, except for we were quarantined, Renee, in a media corral area.
Yeah, in doing these events, I've got to do them since Carrie. Now, they've gotten more and more strict with the protocol as far as where journalists are allowed to go and where they're not allowed to go and what they're allowed to do. And I get it. I mean, nobody wants to see anything bad happen to a candidate, and they have to be that way. But for us to do our jobs, it's really kind of frustrating. Now, you with the egg sandwich, well, I had a Secret Service guy at the Hillary Clinton was at the St. Patrick's Day parade, and I was too close, and I ignored the warning to step away from the candidate. I just didn't hear it. And I felt a hand go back onto my belt, and I'm about 185 pounds. They picked me up like a gallon of milk and removed
Wow.
me. So I was like, wow, okay, right on. I didn't get arrested. It was good.
Well, that's good.
Renee, do you remember, I know you did some Obama events as I did. I don't remember it being that tight during the Obama events. I know at Soldiers and Sailors, for example, in 07, I guess, before the 08 election, I was, we were able to, I walked up and down, I took pictures around, I talked to people, and in fact, I went around back to where he was going to exit and get on his, I think it was a bus. And he walks right out. Obama walks right out, and he shakes hands. He shook my hand, and we were right there. It was, but it's gotten so much more strict as we've gone down. And of course, back during the Bush, I also covered some George Bush events. That was sort of like the height of the press quarantine, and also like that was the first we really saw the First Amendment areas where you could gather there to protest a candidate, several blocks away from the actual event. So, I think that's when things really started changing. I think was back when George W. was running, particularly the second time. I think.
Yeah, but the thing is, too, the lines about what is real media and what is not real
Right.
media have blurred.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of people who say, I have a blog, therefore I'm media, and they're allowing people in who may or may not have the same idea of what they should be allowed to do or what's appropriate.
Wow.
And, there was always kind of a decorum of sorts
Mhm,
with these
yeah.
things, but it's gotten a lot
Right.
wider of a range of expectations.
I mean, they've even become more structured for even like for even some statewide races. Anyway, they've even gotten more structured than they ever had before. I mean, when somebody would come to town, you just walk right up to them, introduce yourself, and just start chatting. Not really. There wasn't any real protocol, but things have really changed, and it's I mean, I don't know. Do you think people are getting bolder, or do you think that that's just like the Donald Trump thing? People are getting bolder because he sickens them to the point that they want to run up and take action or throw something or something like that. What do you think?
I think that if I was in charge of security, I would be doing exactly what
Yeah.
they were doing.
Mhm.
But I also went to a carry event at CMU, and it was open. They were checking people and everything, but I was taking pictures of the snipers on the rooftops, which I'm told is a bad idea. Don't do it. But there were snipers pointed back at the crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is also the situation with with G20 and so forth too. It was trying to cover national politics in some way, even when you're local and people. It's tough to
Yeah.
do. It's really tough to do sometimes.
It was hard to capture the crowd when you're in the media area, trapped behind the crowd, like in the 30 by 60 fenced off area for media. And I really wanted to get video of people's faces. I felt a little bit limited, but then we did have the opportunity, Renee and I and other media members had the opportunity to walk around where they led you around, and you got to sort of like crawl on the floor in front of the stage to to see get video or photos of Bernie up close. So
Yeah, but they want to control. I mean, it's in a way it's about controlling the message as much as it is about controlling crowd and security. I mean, they want to make sure you're talking to the right people. They want to make sure that you're, in the right place, at the right angle to shoot their candidate or whatever. So it's photograph their candidate, not shoot their candidate. Because we'll be a Clinton this week, so I don't want anybody to think that we're hacking him. But, so it'll be interesting to see what her security detail is like too. I mean, when she ran against Obama, it was I went to see Bill Clinton. It was the same type of thing. We were all corralled in an area, and it was in Beaver County actually, and it was it was the same similar type of thing. So it's been around. I think it's gotten a lot tighter and a lot more secure, I guess, for the candidates, but kind of sucks for us.
So those changes, this is just going to be something extra. Those changes kind of reference a few different things. You mentioned Bush's first and second election. Obviously, a lot of people protested the Iraq War at that time. A lot of heightened emotions, let's just say that. Obviously, Renee alluded to the changes in media in terms of blogs. And, I'm sure 10 years or whatever ago, you say BuzzFeed is going to ask a question of the president, they would laugh at you. And now it's like a totally reasonable thing. And then also now, especially with Bernie and Trump, these guys are more, I would say, more branded and more like rock stars than really it's been recently. Which one of those aspects, those changes over the past 15 years, do you think we can attribute the change in the treatment of the press to?
Renee, what do you think?
I think it's the blurring of the line. I think, you have, the Secret Service is there to do one thing, and that is to protect their candidate. And whatever they have to do that, or to feel comfortable in that, they're going to do. And, we as media, it's our job to get past everything that they put up as far as, play within their rules, but make sure we do our job too. And that's what's fun about covering these things, is negotiating that line and getting something that nobody else has.
Right. I think there's a difference between controlling access for security and, again, as I said earlier, controlling the message. And so I think as long as they're still providing full access, like I know there was a press conference that Ashley, I know, attended beforehand. Yeah, so they're giving access. I mean, I'll say this, is that there was, even back when I was, covering 2008, there wasn't a lot of that. So it was kind of good that Bernie set up a press event too. And Hillary Clinton will be here tomorrow or Wednesday. Tomorrow, Wednesday.
Tonight.
So Hillary Clinton will be here tonight. It's really Wednesday, folks, I promise. So it'll be interesting to see what her approach is. I wouldn't expect it would be any different than Bernie's. Whether or not she does a separate press event will be interesting to see, but.
Now, whether the candidate really answers all the questions at the press event
yes.
has nothing to do with security. But
I think it's kind of cool because Ashley hasn't been doing this a long time, but she got right in the mix, and she asked Bernie a question that he apparently pissed him off. What did you ask him?
So he had local unions behind him, and he was coming in really talking about how manufacturing needs to stay local, and people need to keep their jobs, and of course. And so one of the representatives who introduced him in his introduction, he mentioned that he had a business that was affiliated with Claritin Coke Works. And actually, just last Friday, they settled with the health department because they are one of the largest, if not the largest, polluter in this area. So I asked, when I heard him mention Claritin Coke Works, I thought, well, Bernie is often talking about the environment. So I just wanted to hear what Bernie had to say about Bernie. We're on a first name basis. What Bernie Sanders had to say about how he would marry his ideas about protecting the environment and fighting climate change with keeping manufacturing in the U.S. and how could that work together. I thought he had an easy out. He could have talked about manufacturing, renewable tools for renewable energy or something, but he didn't answer my question in very much detail.
Could you tell he was maybe a little irritated in either his tone or posture.
Yeah, well, Bernie Sanders sounds irritated a lot.
He does.
He's often yelling at people.
Right,
He's
yeah.
like, of course they can work together.
Yeah.
Onward.
Well, what I like about that question is that, a lot of people criticize him for being so idealistic, but that, it's just not realistic, and that you're going to basically have
Right.
strange bedfellows, and it's not possible to be a realistic candidate for president and not have some allegiance with people that you disagree with or things that don't quite live up to your ideals.
Well,
I like that you're kind of calling them.
I mean, you can't be a politician at any level without
Yeah.
having that. I mean, people here have to look no further than their mayor's office. I think Bill Peduto has done a lot of great things, but look at Bill Peduto prior to being mayor and look at Bill Peduto after being mayor, you'll find some differences. So, I mean, I don't think it's just inclusive of the all running for the office of president. And I think it's whether you're running for town council of like Podunk or whatever, you've got to be able to find, I guess, compromises.
And
in whatever
Podunk
form
does
of-
have a seat open right now.
Podunk, yes, yeah. Podunk, Mayor Jethro is stepping down after 48 years at the helm. So it's good. He'll be all right.
I mean, I'm not a politician, but I would think one of the first things you should start thinking about is how are you going to connect the dots between all of your campaign platforms that
Right.
you're running on. I think you need to think about the space between those
Right.
campaign platforms and how those will all work together.
Well, I think that the art of politics is negotiating that space.
Yeah.
And the thing about being president is that you're not president in a vacuum. You've still got the Senate and the House and everybody else to add into the conversation. And I don't know that we can ask for the connections to be made at this point in the
That's
game.
true. Yeah.
But I think what we can ask for, realistically at least, I think is at least own those compromises that you make. I mean, there's going to be a fair amount of compromises, or you have to bend here in order to connect, to do something over here. But just own it. I mean, don't try and brush the question aside. Just own it and say, look, this is the best under the current climate, under the current circumstances. This is the best we can hope for, and the good outweighs the bad. And sometimes they will kind of own that, but it's almost they get irritated at that stuff. It just doesn't seem to make sense. And I will say too that I get a little irritated when those connections aren't made, because you've been running for president for a while now. I think that I think you got to be ready for that stuff, because I think there's so much out there. People aren't just reading a short clip in a newspaper. They're going to see raw footage and live interviews. I mean, there is, while we have had voter turnout issues in this country, obviously, there are very, very dedicated and informed people out there who are watching this, and I think that they deserve to have you filling those gaps and be ready to answer those questions, because whether it's fair or not, if you can't answer that question now, how do I know you're going to be able to answer that question next year? So who knows?
It isn't part of the game being like staying as far away from that definite as you can, because everybody else is going to try to stay away from that definite answer. I mean, you don't want to. As a candidate, I don't best game that you want to get into is making that commitment.
That's true, because your definites could then be used against you.
It will be used against
will
you.
be used against you.
Yeah, but I think that when you're trying to become the anti-establishment candidate, which, again, it's tough for him to say because obviously he's been in politics a long time, but he is trying to push a little bit of that. He's trying to push I'm going to do something different. I think when you're that candidate, it's harder for you to do that. I think you need to be speaking in more definites, because if you're really talking hope and change, I think you have to be ready to talk hope and change now as much as talk about hope and change in the future. Now, I will admit, some of those things hurt Obama, Guantanamo Bay and things like that. Those kind of things hurt Obama, but he still got a second term, and I think we all have issues with every president, even the ones you voted for. You have some issues with what they do, but that's what drew people to Obama, is he spoke in a whole lot of definites. Some of those were definite when he took office, and some of them weren't. But but then he still has to own that too. So and explain why they're not definite. So
Well, I'm going to try to
Yeah.
get a question ready for Hillary.
yeah.
So, any ideas?
Huh. I think there are a lot. I think one of the things that Bernie's been kind of and other people have been sort of hitting her on is her. I think she's sometimes I think she's she's conveniently progressive, conveniently liberal, which I think a lot of Democrats are. They're conveniently, because when she ran 8 years ago, you didn't have to pretend you were progressive. Nobody necessarily wanted to see that, in her mind. I mean, Obama certainly did that, but, but that's sort of the thing, though. That's like, but 8 years ago, no one would actually come out and say that they were for same-sex marriage, because that was, at that point, they thought it was a death knell to actually admit that. So, but now, Hillary Clinton, Obama, they probably don't want you to ever remember the time that they were, they didn't favor same-sex marriage, but they favored, domestic partnerships and so forth. So it's, times change, but it's hard to change with it when you've got a record like she does, and a lot of longtime politicians do, especially those that played more toward the middle and kind of played it safe.
All right, Ashley Murray, Charlie Deach, Renee Rosensteel, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Alex.